Welcome to another episode of Leadership Synergized. Today we're going to step out a little bit. While it's a topic and it relates into strong leadership skills, in particular for those leaders looking to grow, be it through self-awareness, be it through employment of a coach, or just learning through reflection, we're going to talk about habits. Habits, what they are, what they've meant, either in success or perhaps even in maybe lack of success in that regard. And we're blessed, and I'm blessed today to have my good friend, John Maxwell, Leadership Certified Team, as you can see in her backdrop, a fantastic coach, trainer, and speaker, my good friend from the Pacific Northwest, Ms. Ruth Easterling. Ruth, thank you for taking time again to join us.
Kevin, it's always my pleasure to hang out with you and talk about leadership. It's really quite a fun thing for me to do, and I enjoy doing it with you. So thank you.
Ruth was with us earlier with a couple of episodes, just talking about her leadership experiences and sharing some knowledge on how we all can take and build our leadership toolbox. And those episodes went over very well, Ruth. Thank you for that input. But it's been a while since we actually sat down and talked. What's happening with Ruth, your family, and your leadership business?
Well, thanks for asking, Kevin. I think that right now is one of those transition times in my life as my kids are getting older. We just are finishing the school year, and I soon will have a sophomore in college, a senior in high school, and a sophomore in high school. And
Wow.
and their lives are super busy. And as we go into the summer, my kids are on swim teams, cross country teams. I mean, we do a lot of sports in the summer. And one of the great things about being in the Northwest is I have a paddle board. I go out on the water on a regular basis and we go hiking and biking. So I had to put a little bit of that in because of the place where we live. So thanks, Kevin.
You have a mission or a signature coaching and leadership focus that you have called On Purpose. Why don't you talk a little bit about that for our viewers and listeners? Because it's a fantastic way to grow and learn, reflect through.
Yeah, so it has been a fun journey for me as I have learned not only the ins and outs of coaching, but as I've helped people over the years, I have seen that a lot of people really struggle with their purpose. Why are they here on earth? And I believe that the creator of the universe made each one of us specifically for a purpose here on earth. And so thank you, Kevin, for asking me, because my business is called On Purpose L3, which means to live on purpose, lead on purpose, and to learn on purpose. And I think that for each one of us, we have to go through this. And one of the things that I help my private coaching clients do is to learn how to live on purpose with their own personal growth journey. And so as they walk through the personal growth journey, it gives them a really good foundation on which to stand, because most of us really don't have that great foundation that we stand on every day. And one of the things that I really encourage every one of my private coaching clients to do is to have really good habits. And habits transition us from just getting things done to doing things intentionally every day and being able to see their lives transition to getting lots done. And I have a couple of, shall we say, secrets that I use with my clients when we talk about habits. The other thing that I do is I have a signature program. It's called the Purpose Journey. And in this, we walk through our own personal growth journey, but then we go, shall we say, to the next stage in which I help each one of my clients learn to live on purpose, and they find their own purpose. And it's really fun because I have so many people that come to me wanting to know kind of where they can take their life, shall we say, for the remainder of their life. And we walk to that place. And so it's really fun. I love it, Kevin.
Outstanding. And we're going to talk about habits here in just a moment. But Ruth, one of the things and a word that comes to mind, especially with the John Maxwell, is a word of the day. And if you're a John Maxwell team member, you're always thinking about what's my word for the day, my word for the year. But what comes to mind as I listen to you here is just the consistency and constancy of positivity you always present for everyone that has a chance to listen and hear. Is that a habit you've had to develop?
Oh, thanks for asking, Kevin. Yes, definitely. Yes. It's funny you say that because one of the very first things that I did when I started my coaching business was I read this book called Atomic Habits. and another by James Clear. And I also read another book called The Compound Effect by Darren Hardy. And I began to recognize that one of the things as a person of faith is that God calls us to be people who are positive. And I've always known that, but I'm not really good at that. And so it was always one of those situations I kind of put on the back burner of my life in my brain. And yes, was I positive? For sure, I was positive. But one of the things that I began to recognize is that through positivity, positive things begin to happen. And one of the things I was challenged when I first began my coaching business was to have a positive outlook on everything. And so I have 3 teenage daughters. And at the time, they weren't all teenagers, but I just began to think, you know what, if I was positive, maybe they would be positive. And so in a sense, that's how that habit of positivity kind of evolved as the days and the years went by.
Thank you for sharing that, Ruth. What a great story in that aspect. And positivity for me as well, the Gallup Strengths Assessment, positivity is near the bottom of my natural talent and strengths piece. And sometimes people will say, well, when I talk about those strengths aspect is you're not a happy person. How can you be positive? But there are other areas of our strengths and talents individually, especially if you use the Gallup Strengths Focus, those top 10 high strengths that are always there, to where positivity comes out and comes through. And for you, I would say that comes through just your openness and willingness to jump into the crowd and meet people.
Thanks, Kevin. I try to be positive as much as I can. And then I also realized that if I have a positive outlook in my day, it transforms my life. Now, since you started talking about habits, I want to just give you one habit that I learned through this positivity. One of the things, there's a book, it's called The Power of Positive Thinking, and it's a very old book. A lot of people have told me about it. I think even my parents told me about it, but I never read it. Never. All I've ever heard is little excerpts from it, right? And so it was during COVID, I decided to pick the book up. And literally, I got it at Goodwill for like 50 cents, right? And so I thought, I'm curious about what this guy has to say about positivity. So I began to read it. And one of the things that he talked about was worry. And I found, as I'm reading through this book, is that every morning I would get up worried. And I was like, why do I do this? Right? Because I mean, I'm going through COVID and there's not a lot going on in my life. And so I could see some habits and some things that I was doing that weren't good. And this was one of them. And so he actually has this little exercise that you do at night before you go to bed, is that you take and you pour out your worry, and like whatever you're worried about, you just take it like as if your brain is like a pitcher, and you just turn it over and you pour all the worry out. And then he has this little saying. So I thought, you know what, I'm just going to try it because like it can't hurt anything. And I don't really enjoy waking up every morning worried about something that I can't control, right? And so I started doing it, and lo and behold, it worked. And so anyway, I had this habit every night doing it. Well, do you know, Kevin, after about doing it for 6 months, I just have it. I had the little card by my bed, and I just pick it up and say it before I went to sleep. And after about 6 months, I started waking up like positive. And I was just really shocked because, again, a client came along and had the same problem. And I said, hey, try this. It worked for me. And so anyway, she did it, and it was great.
Outstanding. So as we talk about habits, let's back up a minute. How do you define a habit?
A habit is something that you have learned how to do through repetition. And when we talk about repetition, I'm not going to say over 60 days, you keep repeating it. Yes, you can do it that way. But a habit is something that you repeatedly do. Okay. So a repetition can happen over and over and over again. It can happen every single day, or it can happen 2 times a week, 5 times a week in 1 week. And it's really over a period of time of the same repetitions, if that makes sense. Because once you get to the place where it's a habit, then it actually transitions into a routine, if that makes sense. It's no longer a habit.
Yeah, I'm sorry. It absolutely does make sense. And there's a point probably in my life, and I don't know about you or others, that when I thought of habit, I thought of happenstance. But then as
Oh,
you reflect back, allowing things just to happen can truly grow into a habit, if you will, something that's repeated, even if you didn't intend it to be repeated in that regard. And for me, eating, I'm a chocolate fiend, right? And whether or not I'm really hungry and I see chocolate, I'm going to have that chocolate in that piece. That's a habit that I've developed over time that became, maybe it came out of happenstance because there just happened to be one piece of chocolate cheesecake there, so to speak, or Milky Way cake my mom used to make for my birthdays. You can't beat when you melt Milky Way candy bars and then turn it into cake with cream cheese icing. I know we're getting off track here, but I just had a strong taste for one of my mom's cakes in that regard. But habits really are what we do almost on a daily basis.
yeah. Yeah. And Kevin, here's the problem is that we all have habits, and some of them are good habits, and some of them are like your Milky Way chocolate habit, right? I have this, I don't have a Milky Way chocolate habit. I have a chocolate habit. It's just chocolate. Every afternoon, I have to have chocolate, trying to get rid of that one. But, and I think what we have to do is we have to look at habits and we have to say, okay, what do I want in my life? So, Kevin, I want to share one thing that happened to me again during this COVID experience is that I started doing these habits, right? And then a friend of mine recommended this book, and it's called The 8 a.m. Miracle Morning. Okay, so basically what this guy did, I can't even remember the author of it, is that he said, if you go step by step through this book, you will be able to get more done in the day by 8 a.m. than other people do. And so I combined what I had learned from the book of Atomic Habits with what he was saying. And I structured my morning so that I would wake up around 5, sometimes a little bit before 5, so that I was actually awake at 5. I have my morning coffee and I do like 8 or 9 things that's like way more than a lot of people do in their entire day. And by 8 a.m., I've just completed, shall we say, a full day of stuff. And so I started doing it, and I can tell you to this day, I'm still doing it, and I've made it a habit, my morning routine, and it is powerful. And I've really enjoyed that habit. So thanks.
No, thank you. That's outstanding in that regard. And as you're talking there, Ruth, I'm thinking as a leader, we face many opportunities to either have good habits in play or maybe not so good habits in play. And I'll just go to one that's pretty commonplace, I think, at least in my experience. And that's the habit of truly coming alongside and listening to others. When we're focused on that multitasking or multiple priority listing that we're working on, we're developing a habit that separates us from a chance to connect.
Right. Yeah. One of the things that I've learned also with habits and leadership is that the problem that most of us have, those of us who have been in leadership for a long time, or even that we're more prone to learn and we love to be, in a sense, in charge. That's me. Okay. I'll admit it.
I don't know you real well, but that's exactly right. I'll vouch for her.
I like being in charge. And so when you're in charge, that means like immediately things are put on your table, right? So one of the things that I had to learn in this process of developing habits, and you'd mentioned even the whole coaching thing, I actually, because of my life as being a coach, I knew that I needed to have my own coach. And so I hired myself my own coach, and she's been fabulous for me and has really confronted some things in my life that I couldn't see. And that's what coaches do. I think that sometimes we're a little hesitant to hire a coach because we're like, oh, I can see that at myself, or I can challenge myself, or I can be accountable for that. And the reality is, often we need people to speak into our lives. And that's where coaching is so powerful. So I hired her, and she began to speak into my life, and she saw things that frankly, I had never seen before. And she began to point out things that were just some limited beliefs that I had. And one of the things that I had was I had a very difficult time with my time management because, like I was just saying, I like to be in charge. So I have a lot of things on my plate. or I have a lot of plates spinning, shall we say. And so I came to one of my coaching sessions and I shared everything that I had going on. And she just looked at me and she said, "You're doing too much." And I'm thinking, how can I get rid of something, right? And this is where I find that leaders really suffer. Okay. So I have helped in my coaching practice, I've helped a lot of leaders. I had one woman who I sat down with her and I said, okay, let's just, it was like the first session. I said, okay, let's list out what you've got. And so we literally listed out 20 things. I mean, these were major things she was doing. She was on boards. These were not even tiny things. And so I said, okay, we're going to unpack this. We're going to take each one of them, take the plate down from spinning, and we're going to unpack it. And we're going to figure out how you can delegate most of it. And you're going to keep your top 4. Okay. Now my coach did that for me, right? She didn't quite do it like that, but that's the way I help people when I'm coaching them, is I help them by unpacking what it is that you're doing so that you can come to an awareness. Gee, I do have a lot of things, but through habits, through making things into routines and delegating, we can, shall we say, pare it down. I don't know if I answered your question, Kevin.
You absolutely did perfectly. And what I take away, to use an athletic coach's analogy, if you will, you're simply trying to get back to focus on the fundamentals of leading self in that regard, fundamentals of accomplishing the big things or the wigs, or keeping the main thing, just to throw all the analogies out there, or acronyms in that regard. But as you're talking there, Ruth, what comes to my mind and my experiences, and this isn't about me in any way, shape, or form as we talk today, but as we get ready to wrap up, I want to end this episode, and Ruth's going to stay with us, and we're going to get more into how we can take habits and make them into more routines that are positive, at least in effort and in attempt, and then turn them just to regular parts of life. But one of the things, as I reflect back now on, and Ruth, you've heard me say before, the fog's gone for me. I can understand exactly why things went the way they went, good, bad, or indifferent. And I think about that whole 1990s offshore movement of American work, and there were fewer workers left in the United States to do the same amount of work or even more. And this whole thing about multitasking became very popular, and I got to be pretty good at it, at least in my area of niche, so to speak. But becoming good at something in the eye of the beholder can still lead to negative habits and bad habits in other areas. Becoming good at managing 4 phone calls at the same time and doing 2 email computer screens, I think, is one of the reasons why I've struggled at times to truly give myself to listen to the other person. And I've missed out on connecting with them because of that.
Yeah. No, and that's true, Kevin. And as you unpack all of that, right? Like you said, you got an email going on here and a phone call going on here, and you got your screens up, and you begin to unpack that, you begin to see who you are too underneath all of that. Because sometimes we begin to realize, oh, sometimes I just want acceptance, right? I'm a leader because I want people to like me, or I like to be in charge because I want everybody to look at me, right? So there's some other things that are going on there too, right? Which is another reason why when you have a coach can say, aha, do you realize you just did 3 times? And you're like, oh no, I had no idea. So, hey, but can I share a little quote from Darren Hardy as we leave?
Do.
Yes. He said, the biggest difference between successful people and unsuccessful people is that successful people are willing to do what unsuccessful people are not. And one of the things that I always like to remind people who are leaders is that we all have our faults. We all have our downfalls. And sometimes we can sit here and we can say, yeah, you know what? I live in the overwhelm, and I should not live in the overwhelm. But I just want to challenge you that it takes courage, and it takes vulnerability, and it takes persistence to do what is required in order to become a healthy, strong leader. And none of us can do that just by doing, right? Doing is part of it, but we have to have the tools to do. And so I just want to challenge you that as you think about being a leader, It's so important. And think about your own leadership strengths. Take the time to do the things and become successful, because everybody else won't do it. And take the time to be persistent and challenge yourself to new habits. So thanks, Kevin.
Well said, Ruth. Well said. And on that challenge, we're going to shift gears from this episode, and we're going to be back. And when we come back, we're going to talk more, because what Ruth just challenged us with is to get on purpose. For her, it's living, leading, learning with the Still leadership model. As you see on my screen here currently, it's really about serving self. It's about loving, whether it's in faith, whether it's self, or whether it's with family. But either way, be on purpose, lead through Still, and you're moving forward in a very positive and impactful way for those blessed to have you in their life. We're going to come back with another episode next week with my good friend, Ruth Easterling. Ruth, thank you for staying around to record the second episode. And this is really good stuff, so I appreciate it, dear.
Yeah, we'll see you.
Thank you for listening to Leadership Synergized. Until next time, have a great day. I appreciate you.